Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Alicia always believed that protecting Vanessa was part of who she was. Since they were little, she was the one who defended, calmed, and covered for her younger sister's mistakes so their parents wouldn't find out. And that instinct never disappeared, even after they grew up and got married with separate lives. Vanessa always had a more free-spirited, impulsive nature, while Alicia was more rational and reserved. Maybe because of that, when she first saw the messages on Vanessa's phone, she didn't react like anyone else would. They were at her house, helping organize boxes of old photos, when Vanessa's phone vibrated with a notification. It was unlocked. A quick, direct message from someone named Brad: "Can't wait to see you again." Alicia pretended not to see it, but she remembered the name. Minutes later, she saw Vanessa smiling at the screen by herself. That bothered her, but she swallowed the doubt. Brad. The name wasn't new. A college classmate, she remembered. Vanessa always spoke about him with a different kind of light in her voice. Alicia thought it was just nostalgia, until she started noticing a pattern. Vanessa always came up with excuses to go out alone. She invented meetings, courses, even visits to friends who weren't actually seen anywhere. The third time in less than a month that Vanessa canceled dinner with Lucas, saying she was swamped with work, Alicia understood. The affair was real. And more than that, it was recurring. It was happening right under everyone's noses. Every day, Alicia carried this secret alone. She thought about confronting her. Thought about telling Daniel, her husband. But the fear of destroying the family was stronger. It always was. Vanessa had been married to Lucas for 6 years. He was a sweet, kind man who always treated both of them with respect and affection. He was the kind of husband who remembered birthdays, helped with holiday dinners, and did the dishes even as a guest. Alicia felt her stomach twist just thinking about his expression if he found out everything. So she chose silence. Preferred to believe it was temporary. That Vanessa would put things back in order. That it was just a detour, a moment. And so, she started carrying the lie every day. But the problem with keeping a secret is that it starts to change from the inside. Alicia became more restless, less present. She avoided gatherings with all 4 of them. When they went to visit their parents, she made up headaches, changed the subject when Daniel asked what was going on. She could no longer look Lucas in the eyes. The worst part, however, was pretending for Daniel. He had always been an honest man, the kind who trusts until proven otherwise. And up until that point, she had never given him any reason for doubt. They shared everything: secrets, plans, joys, frustrations. But now there was something between them. Something that Alicia knew, if she told, would break them. And if she hid it, would break her from within. On a regular afternoon, Vanessa showed up at her house without warning. She brought a bouquet of flowers and a smile on her face. She talked animatedly about a business trip, while Alicia watched in silence, trying to find signs of regret. There were none. None at all. It was as if she was living 2 lives. The faithful wife in front of Lucas, and the passionate lover with Brad. When Alicia finally asked if it was going to last much longer, Vanessa simply laughed. Said that Brad made her feel alive. That with him, she remembered who she was before she got married. "You understand, right?" she asked. And Alicia, with a lump in her throat, just nodded, unable to say anything. After that conversation, Alicia started having trouble sleeping. She spent nights staring at the ceiling, imagining how all of this would end. She was afraid that Lucas would find out the hard way. She was afraid that Daniel would also find out and wouldn't forgive the fact that she had chosen to hide it. The dilemma was unbearable. She was trapped between 2 important bonds: loyalty to her sister and the truth she owed her husband. And though she tried to justify it to herself, she knew that either choice would come at a high cost. The situation became even more delicate when, at a family barbecue, Lucas approached Alicia to ask if Vanessa was going through some kind of problem. He said that his wife had been distant, cold, and that he felt like she had her head somewhere else. Alicia almost cried right then. She felt like grabbing that man by the shoulders and telling him everything. But she just smiled and said maybe it was just work stress. Lucas thanked her and went to get a drink, leaving Alicia with a bitter taste in her mouth. At that moment, she realized she was betraying the trust of everyone, including her own. One Friday afternoon, Alicia was at home organizing some things when she received an unexpected call from Lucas. His voice was calm, but carried a hint of uncertainty. He asked if Vanessa had spent the afternoon with her. Confused, Alicia hesitated for a moment and replied with another question, why? It was then that Lucas said, naturally, that Vanessa had just arrived home and mentioned she had spent the day with her sister. Taken by surprise and unsure how to react, Alicia took a deep breath, tried to sound natural, and confirmed, yes, she was here with me. Lucas thanked her, apologized for the inconvenience, and hung up, leaving Alicia with a racing heart and a bitter taste in her mouth. The next day, Alicia looked for Vanessa and, still trying to contain her irritation, snapped, "How do you involve me like that? You could at least warn me." Vanessa shrugged and, with a light smile, replied, "Relax. Lucas trusts you." That made Alicia's stomach churn. The feeling of being trapped in a web that wasn't hers only increased. A week later, in the middle of the afternoon, Vanessa called again and said directly, "If Lucas calls you, tell him we're shopping together." Alicia closed her eyes for a moment. The situation was starting to get out of control. It wasn't just a secret anymore, it was turning into a dangerous web of lies. In the following days, Alicia tried to convince herself that she was doing the right thing. That protecting her sister was a way to keep the family united. That she was being loyal. But deep down, she already knew that the line between loyalty and complicity was thinner than she imagined. And that maybe, she had crossed that line without realizing it. That was when Daniel started asking more direct questions. He wanted to know why Alicia had been acting so distant. Why she avoided spending time with Vanessa. Why, suddenly, she seemed uncomfortable with things that used to be natural. Alicia always gave an excuse. Said she was tired, that it was just in his head. But Daniel wasn't dumb. And the more she lied, the more attention he paid. The trust between them began to change slowly. Daniel started observing everything. And Alicia, even without knowing it, was already being discovered, not by words, but by silences. Daniel always paid attention to details. Small gestures, silences, hesitations. He wasn't the type to suspect without reason, but he also never let things pass when something started to stand out. In the past few months, Alicia had been different. She avoided certain events, changed the subject easily, and seemed uncomfortable whenever Vanessa was the topic of conversation. She said it was just stress, workload, daily life stuff. But to him, it didn't look like fatigue. It was as if she was hiding something. Something important. And the more she avoided looking him in the eye, the more he felt he was right. That's why Daniel started paying closer attention. He noticed the timings, the side conversations, the reactions. One time, during a family lunch, he noticed how tense Alicia became when Vanessa mentioned a tiring business trip, according to her. Lucas praised his wife, saying she was dedicated and hardworking. Alicia smiled strangely and stayed silent for too long. Daniel noticed. These were details that would escape distracted eyes, but for him, they were all there, screaming. That night, while washing the dishes, Daniel said only one sentence, "You and Vanessa are different." Alicia replied that he was imagining things and went back to talking about the menu for the next weekend's dinner. But that had planted a concrete doubt. And Daniel, even reluctantly, started putting pieces together. He began observing more carefully the actions of Vanessa, the schedules of Alicia, and the recurring excuses they both gave at different times. He started noticing that whenever Vanessa said she was busy or traveling for work, Alicia also distanced herself from family events or made up reasons not to attend. The patterns repeated. During one of these absences, Daniel decided to discreetly check Alicia's tablet history, which was unlocked in the kitchen. Among recipe tabs and news sites, he found searches for hotels in the city center, always on weekends. There were also searches for cafes and quiet places he knew Alicia never frequented. The strangeness increased when he noticed that in one of those hotels, Vanessa had marked her presence in an old post from a restaurant in the same building, something she hadn't told anyone. It was subtle, but for Daniel, it wasn't coincidence. Everything was connected, and Alicia was part of it. From then on, Daniel decided to seek answers. Not because he suspected his wife, but because somehow, he already knew Alicia was involved in all of this. He didn't need confirmation. He needed to understand how far it went. He started cross-referencing schedules, dates, comments. He saw that Vanessa claimed to be in certain places, but the locations and posts matched the times when Alicia also said she was busy. The coincidence happened too often to be just that. At one point, Daniel even considered hiring someone, but he preferred to trust his own intuition. One common night, already in bed, he asked if Alicia thought Vanessa was happy in her marriage. The answer came quickly, of course she is. But the way she looked away, the way she clenched her fingers, gave away more than she intended. It was the kind of rehearsed response, meant to keep a structure standing. And Daniel understood that Alicia knew. Not exactly what, nor for how long, but she knew. And she was lying. This hurt him more than anything else. The woman he shared everything with, who he always considered transparent, was now there, covering up a story involving lies, hidden meetings, and most importantly, someone he deeply respected, Lucas. It was late afternoon when Daniel arrived home early from work and heard voices coming from the study. Alicia was speaking softly on the phone, but when he approached the slightly open door, he realized it was a video call with Vanessa. At first, he thought about announcing his arrival, but one sentence froze his movements. Vanessa said she would go out to meet Brad at a cafe in the city center. Alicia, laughing quietly, responded lightly, "That cafe is perfect. Very private, nobody we know goes there. You two will be fine." The words came without weight, without guilt, as if she were encouraging an innocent adventure. Daniel leaned against the wall in the hallway, feeling his body heat up. It was no longer speculation. Vanessa was definitely cheating on Lucas, and Alicia was helping to hide it. When Alicia ended the call, Daniel stepped back and went straight to the bedroom. He grabbed his phone and typed the name of the cafe. It was small, discreet, hidden among some commercial shops. A perfect place for someone who wanted to remain unnoticed. He didn't say a word to Alicia or anyone else. He just took the car keys and left. Traffic seemed slower than usual, and each red light increased his anxiety. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but his heart beat strongly, as if it already knew what he would find. When he parked a short distance from the location, he observed through the glass window what would confirm everything: Vanessa, facing Brad, smiling, with her hands entwined with his. A few seconds later, she leaned in and kissed him. Long and intimate. As if it were something normal for the two of them. Daniel pulled his phone out of his pocket and started recording. Not out of revenge, but because he needed the truth documented. It was the only way to face what was coming next without being questioned. He recorded the gestures, the smiles, the kiss, the touches. After that, he put the phone back in his pocket and returned to the car. The drive back was silent. The steering wheel tight in his hands, his eyes fixed on the road, and in his head, the same question repeated on loop: why was Alicia doing this? The pain of betrayal didn't come only from what Vanessa was doing to Lucas, but from what his own wife had chosen to support. When he entered the house, he passed Alicia in the living room without saying anything. He went straight upstairs and locked the door. For the first time, he felt married to a stranger. The week passed with a heavy silence in the house. Alicia noticed that Daniel was strange, distant, but he limited himself to short answers and automatic gestures. He was polite, but cold. He no longer touched her. Avoided any long conversations. And unlike before, he no longer asked questions. Alicia thought it was just a phase. Maybe he was just tired from work or overwhelmed with some concern. But deep down, she knew. She knew a line had been crossed, but she didn't yet know how much. Daniel, on the other hand, kept everything under control. He had seen enough. Understood enough. He just needed to choose how and when to make all of it fall apart. And the moment came. On Sunday morning, he woke up before Alicia and made breakfast as he always did. She found it strange but didn't comment. Hours later, Daniel sent a message in the family group suggesting a dinner at home that night. He wrote that he wanted to gather everyone, that it had been a long time since they had seen each other calmly. Vanessa replied excitedly. Lucas also confirmed. Alicia smiled, relieved, thinking it was a good sign. Maybe Daniel was returning to normal. Maybe the bad mood was just stress. She spent the afternoon preparing the table, organizing everything as she did on birthdays. She set out the nice dishes, lit candles, and chose a soft playlist. When Vanessa and Lucas arrived, everything seemed normal. Hugs, jokes, compliments about the food. But Daniel didn't smile. He just watched. During dinner, the atmosphere was cordial. Vanessa talked about work, Lucas commented on a business trip coming up. Alicia tried to keep appearances, chatting about light topics, avoiding anything that might touch deep emotions. Daniel barely touched his food. At one point, he stood up, grabbed the TV remote from the living room, and said firmly, "Before dessert, I need to show you something." Everyone looked at him, surprised. He connected his phone to the TV, opened the gallery, and, without any introduction, pressed play. The video began. Vanessa and Brad, sitting in a discreet cafe, holding hands. Then, kissing. Long and without disguises. Silence took over the room. Alicia froze. Vanessa turned pale. Lucas continued watching the screen, paralyzed. Daniel paused the video, looked at Lucas, and said, "She cheated on you. And my wife knew. 4 months." Alicia tried to say something, but her voice failed. Vanessa stood up, stammered, said it wasn't what it seemed. Lucas looked at his wife for a second that seemed to last forever. Then, he stood up and left the house without saying a single word. Alicia went after him, but stopped at the door, without the courage to go further. Vanessa, alone, sat down again, her face shocked. Daniel looked at Alicia, the woman who once was his partner in everything, and said, "The worst betrayal wasn't hers. It was yours." Then he went upstairs and locked himself in the room. The dinner ended with cold plates, empty chairs, and the sound of a family that had been destroyed from within. The next morning, Alicia woke up alone. Daniel's side of the bed was made. There was no sign of him in the house, no note, no noise coming from the kitchen, as was customary. She stayed still for a few minutes, trying to understand if what had happened the previous night was really real. Slowly, the images came back like flashes, the video, the silence, Daniel's disappointed look, Vanessa's pale face, Lucas leaving without looking back. That wasn't a nightmare. It was the new reality. Alicia walked around the house like she was on unfamiliar ground. Everything around her seemed the same, but something inside her had changed permanently. She tried calling Daniel, but the calls went straight to voicemail. She sent messages, which remained unanswered. During the afternoon, she called the company and found out he had taken a few days off. Alicia understood he was distancing himself. Not impulsively, but by choice. It was as if he needed space to breathe after swallowing everything he had discovered, and everything she had hidden. She spent the rest of the day in silence, with the phone in her hand, unsure whether she should try to talk to Vanessa or Lucas. Shame prevented her. Guilt was already crushing her. She tried convincing herself that all of this was caused by love for her sister, by fear of destroying the family. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this justification no longer supported anything. Vanessa also didn't appear. The last image Alicia had of her sister was the shocked face after watching her downfall projected onto a TV screen. They had always protected each other. Shared clothes, secrets, childhood stories, moments that no one else knew. But now, there was a chasm between them. And that chasm had a name, a time, and a date marked, that dinner. Alicia tried writing a message, but deleted it before finishing. She knew that any word would sound hollow. There was no longer a way to pretend it was just a passing mistake. They drifted apart without discussing it. The distance came from the lack of courage to face their own actions. Lucas, for his part, disappeared from radar. He deactivated his social media, blocked contacts from Vanessa's family, and moved out of the house he shared with her. A mutual friend told her weeks later that he had started the divorce process. Nothing was said in person. Nothing was explained. Vanessa tried to find him, left notes, messages, emails. No response. Lucas, the kind man everyone knew, simply chose silence as protection. And for him, this decision was final. For Vanessa, it was devastating. For the first time in a long time, she found herself alone with the consequences of her choices. Brad disappeared from her life shortly after the scandal. He stopped answering messages, vanished from social media, and, as far as it seemed, had ended what for him was just a hidden romance. Vanessa understood that what she had thought was freedom was actually a shortcut to emptiness. Daniel came back home 2 days later, but didn't bring conversation. He lived there as if they were just sharing space. He arrived late, avoided any contact beyond what was necessary, and answered everything politely but without involvement. Alicia tried to start a conversation, tried cooking his favorite recipes, even tried apologizing more directly. But all her attempts hit an invisible wall he had raised to protect himself. On one ordinary night, she asked if they still had a future. Daniel replied calmly, "Trust is like glass. Once broken, it can be glued again. But it will never be the same." And he left the room as if that sentence had ended not just the conversation, but their entire story. A few days later, Alicia received an envelope from the law office that had represented Daniel years ago when they bought the house. Inside, she found the divorce papers. No letter, no explanation. Just the process, already started, waiting for her signature. She stayed there for hours, staring at those pages. That night, for the first time, she cried non-stop. Not because Daniel had left, but because she had allowed everything to reach that point. Because she had chosen the lie, believing it was protection. Because she had believed that keeping a secret in the name of the family made her loyal. When, in reality, she had crossed a line she should never have gone beyond. Life went on for everyone, but with deep marks. Alicia moved into a small apartment and slowly started over. Vanessa, out of pride or shame, avoided any attempt at reconciliation. The two, once inseparable, were now just memories of each other. Time passed, but the story remained alive, like a constant echo reminding that silence, when used to protect lies, can be as destructive as the betrayal itself. And sometimes, the worst disappointment comes exactly from the person you thought you knew best. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.